Now, David Cameron will not take part in any EU referendum TV debates with Boris Johnson or other fellow Conservatives. Downing Street says they don't want the campaign to turn into a fight between Tory politicians. Meanwhile, Vote Leave, the official ad campaign, says it's considering legal action after accusing ITV of taking sides. The broadcaster excluded them from a debate and instead invited Nigel Farage to represent those who want to leave the EU. We can get more on this now with our assistant political editor, Norman Smith, who's in Westminster. And Norman, multiple rows, it seems, going alongside by side and somewhat distracting from the substance of the argument, really.
Well, distracting not just from the substance of the argument, but the view of some Brexit campaigners, deliberately so, because also today we've had released a report on the immigration figures by the Office for National Statistics. Now, these have been long-awaited figures which are meant to explain the discrepancy between the official figures and the number of national insurance cards handed out to EU migrants, with the number receiving national insurance cards roughly double the number in the official figures. Well, we got a report today from the Office for National Statistics saying, well, this is okay, could all be explained by short-term migration, people coming here to work for a while and then returning home. Well, joining me is the former Work and Pension Secretary, Iain Duncan Smith. Well, that's okay then, so we know now why there is this discrepancy.
Well, it's not a discrepancy, it's a fact. The truth is, no matter how they try and dress this up, the ONS and others are wrong when they say that this is simply explained by short-term migration. What everybody knows out there is the scale of migration is very high. It's very high on their passenger survey, and these stats today show that it's even higher than they originally forecast, significantly higher. And the point about this is you can't dismiss short-term migration. I made a speech this week pointing out that short-term migration, where people don't commit to living in the UK for under 52 weeks, they come in, they do hot bedding in bed and breakfast and things like that. They then take jobs at much lower rates. This has forced the salaries and wages of people in low-skilled and semi-skilled jobs down, so they have suffered directly as a result of uncontrolled borders with short-term migration. Long-term migration, big impact on housing, health and education. Short-term migration, big impact on people's salaries and on healthcare, because they still claim healthcare while they're over here. So the two put together show this is simply out of control because we don't control our borders. And I'm astonished that a government, my government, can sit here and say we had a pledge to bring down migration to tens of thousands, but it's all right then because it doesn't matter how many people come in as long as they don't stay more than 52 weeks.
And how do you read the fact that this report has come out on the same day as we've had this row over television debates and, of course, the statement on the BBC?
I've been in government long enough, Norman, and you've been reading these things long enough and commentating on to know that none of this happens by accident. The truth is, these figures show something categoric, which the Remain campaign has been running away from. Migration has been out of control in the UK for some time, and one of the biggest reasons for that has been the open borders we have with the European Union. This demonstrates today that that is absolutely the case, that it's way bigger than the passenger survey figures that they put out. It's damaging in all regards in terms of public services, wage competition, everything else. So they put it out on a day when they also put out something in the hope that you at the BBC will say, oh, we've got to really report the BBC and other bits they're piling out. I've been in government long enough to know how these things are done, but I say this. For the public out there, the number one issue that they are concerned about is the danger and threat to their incomes, to their jobs, to their access to housing, to healthcare, and getting their kids into a school. We're having to build more housing, more schooling, we're having to get more doctors and nurses, etc., because the pressures of migration are damaging people's lives. This is not about being against migration, it's about having controlled migration, which you can only get if you leave the European Union.
And I'd like to ask you about remarks by the Governor of the Bank of England, Mark Carney, this morning, who has warned that Brexit would not only damage growth in the UK, but would hit the global economy too.
Well, first of all, we know one thing from all of the reports that have come out, is that if we leave the European Union, every report, including the IMF and everybody else, said the UK economy will continue to grow. And so the second thing I'd make about the Governor of the Bank of England, I'd be very careful about his entering the fray on this one, because whatever else, forecasts are almost always wrong. And his own forecast from the bank, I recall when he told us that unemployment would fall very slowly, they were wrong about that, it fell far faster. He said they'd have to raise interest rates almost certainly when unemployment fell below around a certain percentage. We've broken through that. They haven't raised interest rates. The economy hasn't performed according to what they think. If anybody can tell me they know what the global economy is going to be doing over the next year, let alone next 10 years, I have to say either they're soothsayers or they've got some link with God. I simply tell you this, that all forecasts at the end are wrong. We should take them all with a pinch of salt, whether they come from the Governor of the Bank of England, the IMF, or any other organisation. The truth is, Britain, the 5th largest economy in the world, will make its way in the world very happily. But the rest of the world isn't going to die if we leave the European Union. Quite the contrary, I think it'll thrive.
Iain Duncan Smith, thanks very much for your time. Anita, it's all kicking off here. We've got rows over the immigration figures, we've got rows over the TV debates, and now a row over Governor Carney's latest comments.
OK, Norman, thank you very much for that.